When I walked into that courtroom, my father actually rolled his eyes. He didn't even try to hide it. He just slumped back in his chair, looked at the ceiling, and sighed loud enough for people 3 rows back to hear. Next to him, my mother leaned over and whispered something behind her hand. My brother, Evan, just smirked at me. It was a look I knew well. It was the look that said, "Here comes Claire. The mess. The mistake." They sat there in their expensive suits, looking so confident. They thought this hearing was just a formality. They thought they were going to walk out of here with control over the $1.2 million my grandfather left me. They honestly believed I was too weak to fight back. They thought I was just going to hand it over because they told me to, but they were wrong. They hadn't looked closely at the name on the legal docket. They didn't know that the daughter they treated like a ghost had spent the last 4 years quietly becoming a lawyer. They didn't know I wasn't just the defendant. I was the opposing counsel. I set my briefcase down on the table and looked at my father. "Keep rolling your eyes, Dad. In about 10 minutes, you're going to lose everything." Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me, where in the world are you watching from? Growing up in our house in Ohio, I learned a very hard lesson before I was even 10 years old. I learned that love in the Monroe family was not something you were born with. It was something you had to buy, or it was something that was given to you for reasons I could never understand. I was the invisible daughter. That is the best way to describe it. I wasn't beaten. I wasn't starved. My parents, Linda and Robert, fed me and bought me clothes, but I was like a piece of furniture to them. I was there taking up space, but I didn't really matter. My brother, Evan, was different. Evan was the sun, and my parents were the planets orbiting around him. He was 2 years older than me. If Evan got A/B on a test, my mother would bake a cake to celebrate his hard work. If I got an A on a test, my father would just nod and turn back to the television. I remember one specific Christmas, when I was 16. I had asked for a laptop. I needed one for school because the library was closing early those days, and I had a lot of papers to write. I had talked about it for months. On Christmas morning, there was a huge box for Evan. He tore it open. It was a brand new gaming computer system, the most expensive one you could buy. He didn't even need it for school. He just wanted to play games. My parents watched him with big smiles on their faces. "Do you like it, son?" my dad asked, beaming. "Yeah, it's cool," Evan said, barely looking up. Then they handed me my gift. It was a small, soft package. I opened it. It was a sweater. It was a beige sweater, 2 sizes too big. It was on sale, my mom said, sipping her coffee. "You'll grow into it." I looked at the sweater, and then I looked at Evan's $1,000 computer. I didn't cry. I had learned a long time ago not to cry in front of them. Tears just made them annoyed. They would call me dramatic or ungrateful. So I just said, "Thank you," and folded the sweater. That was my life. When Evan graduated high school, my parents bought him a new red sports car. They said he needed reliable transportation for college. When I graduated 2 years later, I asked if I could use the old family van to get to my classes at the community college. We traded it in, my dad told me. We needed the money to pay for Evan's fraternity dues. "You can take the bus. It builds character." So I took the bus. I took the bus for 4 years. I worked nights at a diner called Sally's Place to pay for my own books and my own tuition. I would come home smelling like grease and old coffee at 1 a.m., and the house would be dark. No one ever left a light on for me. I used to wonder what was wrong with me. Was I not pretty enough? Was I not smart enough? I tried so hard to be perfect. I cleaned the house without being asked. I cooked dinner on weekends. I never got in trouble, but it didn't matter. To Linda and Robert, I was just Claire. I was the backup plan. I was the extra. But there was one person who saw me. My grandfather, Henry Monroe. He was my father's father, but he was nothing like my dad. Henry was a retired accountant. He was a quiet man who wore cardigans and always smelled like peppermint and old paper. He lived in a small bungalow on the other side of town. Every Sunday, while my parents and Evan were busy watching football or going to brunch with their country club friends, I would take the bus to Grandpa Henry's house. Those Sundays were the only times I felt like a real person. Grandpa Henry wasn't a loud man. He didn't give big hugs or make big speeches. He showed he cared by teaching me things. We would sit at his kitchen table, and he would open his ledgers. He was old school. He wrote everything down in columns with a sharp pencil. "Claire," he would say in his raspy voice, "look at this." He would show me his utility bills, his grocery receipts, and his bank statements. Most people don't look, he told me. They just pay. They assume the world is honest. But the world makes mistakes, Claire. And sometimes the world lies. He taught me how to balance a checkbook when I was 12. By the time I was 18, he was teaching me about compound interest, tax laws, and how to read a contract. Always read the fine print, he said, tapping the paper with his finger. The big print gives it to you. The fine print takes it away. I didn't know why he was teaching me this. I thought he was just lonely and wanted to talk about his work. But I listened. I listened because he looked me in the eye when he spoke to me. He listened to my opinions. He didn't interrupt me. One afternoon, I was crying. I had just found out that my parents had paid for Evan to go on a ski trip to Aspen, while they told me they couldn't afford to help me fix a chipped tooth. Grandpa Henry poured me a cup of tea. He sat down across from me. "It hurts," he said simply. He didn't try to tell me they loved me deep down. He didn't lie to me. "Yes," I said, wiping my eyes. "Why do they hate me, Grandpa?" He sighed and looked out the window. "They don't hate you, Claire. They are just blind. Your father has always been obsessed with status. Evan is a boy, and in your father's mind, the boy carries the name. The boy is the trophy. You are just the daughter." He reached across the table and patted my hand. His hand was dry and papery. "But listen to me," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You are stronger than them. Evan is weak because he has never had to struggle. Your parents are weak because they care too much about what the neighbors think. You are walking through fire every day. That makes you steel." Then he said the phrase that stuck with me forever. "Trust but verify, Claire. In life and in family, especially in family, document everything. Keep your receipts. One day, you will need them." I didn't understand what he meant by one day. I just thought he was giving me advice for my job at the diner. I kept going to see him all through college. When I got into law school, secretly, because I didn't want my parents to mock me for trying, Grandpa Henry was the only one I told. I remember his face when I told him. He didn't smile big. He just nodded, a serious look in his eyes. "Good," he said. "The law is a weapon, Claire. Learn how to use it. And don't tell them. Not yet." "Why not?" I asked. "Because they will try to stop you," he said. "Or they will try to take credit for it. Do it for yourself." So I did. I stayed the invisible daughter. I went to class during the day, worked at night, and studied on the bus. When I came home for holidays, I played the part of the quiet, failing daughter. I let them think I was struggling. I let Evan brag about his business ventures that were mostly just him spending Dad's money. I waited. I worked. And I visited Grandpa Henry until he got too sick to stay at home. When he went into the hospice care center, I was the one who sat by his bed every night. My parents visited once a week, for 20 minutes. Evan never came. He said hospitals creeped him out. The night Grandpa Henry died, it was just me and him. He was very weak. He couldn't speak much, but he squeezed my hand. He pointed to his old leather briefcase in the corner of the room. "Briefcase," he whispered. "I have it, Grandpa," I said. "Read everything," he wheezed. "Don't let them trick you." "I won't," I promised. He died an hour later. I sat there in the silence, holding his hand until it went cold. I cried, but not loudly. I cried because he was the only shield I had in this world. I called my parents to tell them the news. "Oh," my mother said. She sounded like I had just told her it was raining. "Well, that's a shame. He was very old, Claire. It was time." "I'll come home," I said. "Yes, do that," she said. "We have a lot of planning to do. The funeral needs to look right. People will be watching." That was all she cared about, how it looked. I hung up the phone. I looked at Grandpa Henry one last time. I promised him I would be steel. I grabbed his old leather briefcase, the one he told me to look at, and I walked out into the night. I didn't know it yet, but the war had just started. The funeral was a performance. That is the only word for it. My mother, Linda, wore a black dress that cost more than my car. She cried into a lace handkerchief whenever anyone was looking, but the moment the guests turned away, she was snapping at the caterers about the quality of the shrimp. My father, Robert, stood by the casket shaking hands, looking solemn and important. He talked about my father's legacy and family values. It made me sick. He hadn't visited Grandpa Henry in months before he died. Evan was there, of course. He was wearing a suit that was a little too tight, checking his phone every 5 minutes. He looked bored. He actually yawned during the eulogy. I sat in the back row. I wore a simple black dress I had bought at a thrift store. I didn't cry at the service. I had done my crying in the hospital room. I just sat there and watched them perform. I felt like a stranger at my own grandfather's funeral. After the service, everyone came back to our house. The house was full of people drinking wine and eating tiny sandwiches. My parents were in their element. They loved being the center of attention, even if the reason was death. It's so hard, I heard my mother say to a neighbor. But we're holding up. We have to be strong for the children.
She didn't even look at me when she said it.
I spent the reception in the kitchen, washing dishes. No one asked me to, but it was the only place where I could be alone. 2 days later, the call came. It was from Richard Owens. He had been the family lawyer for 30 years. He was a tall man with gray hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He was my father's golf buddy. I never liked him. He always looked at me like I was a waitress who had messed up his order. "We need everyone at the office on Thursday for the reading of the will," his secretary told me over the phone. "I'll be there," I said. I knew my parents were excited. They didn't say it, but I could feel it. Grandpa Henry had been careful with money his whole life. They knew he had savings. They were already talking about remodeling the kitchen and buying a vacation home in Florida. Evan was talking about investing in a new nightclub downtown. They were already spending the money before they even had it. Thursday morning arrived. The sky was gray and drizzling rain. I drove my beat-up car to the law office downtown. I parked 2 blocks away so my parents wouldn't see my car and make a comment about how trashy it looked. I walked into the conference room. It was a large room with a long mahogany table and leather chairs that squeaked when you sat in them. The air smelled of furniture polish and expensive cologne. My parents were already sitting at the head of the table. They looked like royalty. Evan was next to them, leaning back with his feet crossed at the ankles. I sat at the far end of the table, opposite them. Richard Owens walked in carrying a thick file. He shook my father's hand, kissed my mother on the cheek, and gave Evan a high five. He barely nodded at me. "Let's get started, shall we?" Richard said, sitting down. Henry was a meticulous man. He left very specific instructions. My father leaned forward, his eyes greedy. "Let's hear it, Richard." Richard opened the file. "All right. First, the real estate." He adjusted his glasses. "To my grandson, Evan Monroe, I leave the family home on Oak Street." Evan pumped his fist.
"Yes.
"That place is worth at least 400 grand. My mother clapped her hands. "Oh, Evan, that's wonderful." I stayed silent. I didn't expect anything, really. "To my son, Robert, and his wife, Linda," Richard continued, "I leave the entirety of my stock portfolio and the bonds held in the primary investment account." My father let out a long breath. "Excellent. What's the valuation on that, Richard?" "As of this morning, roughly $600,000, Richard said. My parents looked at each other and smiled. It was the smile of people who had just won the lottery. They were rich. They were happy. "And finally," Richard said, turning a page, "to my granddaughter, Claire." The room went quiet. Everyone looked at me. My father had a smirk on his face, like he was expecting a joke. "To Claire," Richard read, "I leave the contents of the Education and Future Fund account." My mother scoffed. "The Education Fund? We set that up when she was a baby. There can't be more than a few $1,000s in there. We stopped contributing to it when she was 10. "Actually," Richard said, and for the first time, he looked confused. He squinted at the paper. "That's not correct, Linda." "What do you mean?" my father asked sharply. "According to these documents," Richard said, his voice slow, "Henry has been depositing his pension checks and the dividends from his private accounting firm into this specific fund for the last 20 years. He never touched it. He let it compound. So, how much is it?" Evan asked, sounding annoyed. Richard looked up from the paper. He looked at me, then at my parents. "The current balance of the Education and Future Fund," Richard announced, "is $1,240,000. The silence that followed was heavy. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. My father's face went pale. My mother's mouth dropped open. Evan stopped slouching. "What?" my father whispered. "Read that again." $1.2 million, Richard said. "It's all in Claire's name. It is a direct beneficiary designation. It bypasses probate. It's hers. Effective immediately." I sat there, stunned. I felt tears prick my eyes. Grandpa Henry, he had been saving for me. All those years, while my parents bought new cars and went on trips, he was quietly building a future for me. He knew I would need a way out. That's impossible, my mother screamed. She stood up, knocking her chair back. Henry was senile. He didn't know what he was doing. That money belongs to the family. Sit down, Linda, Richard said, but he looked rattled. No, my father shouted. He turned to me. His eyes were cold and dark. Claire, this is obviously a mistake. You know that, right? Grandpa made a mistake. I looked at him. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt the weight of that $1.2 million behind me. It wasn't just money. It was freedom. I don't think it was a mistake, I said quietly. Grandpa taught me to be careful with numbers. He didn't make mistakes with money. You little ungrateful. My mother started, her face turning red. Linda, stop, Richard said, holding up a hand. Let's not make a scene. We can discuss this like civilized people. He looked at me with a fake, predatory smile. Claire, obviously this is a lot of money for a young woman to handle. Your parents are just concerned. We can set up a meeting next week to discuss how to manage this properly. I looked at Richard. I looked at my parents, who were looking at me like wolves looking at a wounded deer. They didn't see a daughter. They saw a bank account. I remembered Grandpa's words. Trust, but verify. I'll think about it, I said. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. I have to go to work. Claire, my father barked. Sit down. We are not done here. I said. I walked out of the conference room. I could hear them shouting at Richard as I walked down the hall. I got into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. When the doors closed, I leaned against the metal wall and took a deep breath. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. They were going to come for me. I knew it. They weren't going to let me keep that money. They felt entitled to it. They felt they deserved it because they were the real Monroes, and I was just the extra. But they didn't know I had the briefcase. And they didn't know what else Grandpa Henry had left for me inside it. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Evan. Don't get too comfortable with that cash, sis. Dad is furious. You better fix this. I deleted the text. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't go to my second job. I went home to my small apartment, locked the door, and opened Grandpa Henry's briefcase. I needed to see what else he had taught me, because the war wasn't just starting anymore. The first shot had been fired. 2 weeks after the will reading, the summons came. It wasn't a court summons yet. It was a text from my mother. Dinner. Sunday night, 6 p.m. Do not be late. Richard will be joining us to finalize details. I stared at the phone. My stomach turned over. I knew this wasn't going to be a family dinner. There would be no pot roast and casual conversation. This was an ambush. I almost didn't go. I had the money in my name now. I could have just blocked their numbers and moved to another state. But I couldn't leave yet. I had a life here, and more importantly, I had a feeling that if I ran, they would chase me. My father wasn't the type of man who let things go. He treated his family like he treated his employees. He owned us. I drove to the house on Sunday. It was a large, brick colonial house with white pillars. It looked perfect from the outside. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. The windows sparkled. It was the picture of the American dream. But I knew how cold it was inside. When I walked in, there were no smells of cooking. The dining room table wasn't set for dinner. Instead, it was covered in file folders and legal pads. My father sat at the head of the table. My mother was to his right. Richard Owens, the lawyer, was to his left. Evan was leaning against the wall, scrolling on his phone, looking bored but smug. Sit down, Claire, my father said. He didn't say hello. He pointed to a wooden chair placed in the center of the room, facing them. It felt like an interrogation. I sat down. I kept my back straight. I clutched my purse in my lap because my hands were shaking and I didn't want them to see. We need to fix this mess, my father began. His voice was low and serious. Your mother and I have been up nights worrying about you. Henry's will, it was irresponsible. He wasn't thinking clearly at the end. Giving that kind of money to a girl your age, with your history, is dangerous. My history? I asked. You mean my history of working 2 jobs and paying for my own school because you wouldn't help me? My mother made a tisk-tisk sound. Don't be dramatic, Claire. We are talking about your stability. You are emotional. You get overwhelmed easily. We are afraid you'll blow this money on nonsense or get scammed. Richard cleared his throat and slid a thick document across the polished table toward me. This is a solution, Richard said smoothly. It's a family harmony agreement. It's a trust vehicle. Very standard for high net worth families. I looked at the document. It was 50 pages long. What does it do? I asked. It places the $1.2 million into a centralized family trust, Richard explained. Your father and mother will act as the trustees. They will manage the investments to ensure the capital grows. And what do I get? I asked. You become a beneficiary of the trust, Richard said. You will receive a monthly stipend. We calculated a generous amount based on your current lifestyle, $2,000 a month. I stared at him. Then I looked at my father. $2,000? I said. The interest alone on that account is making more than that. You want to take my inheritance, control it, and give me an allowance like I'm a child. It's for your own protection, my mother snapped. We are trying to help you. Do you know how much tax you'll have to pay? Do you know how to manage a portfolio?
No.
You flip burgers, Claire. You don't manage millions. I don't flip burgers anymore, Mom, I said calmly. I work in a law office as a paralegal. I didn't tell them I was actually a junior associate lawyer yet. I wanted to keep that card hidden. Paralegal, secretary, whatever. Evan chimed in from the wall. Just sign the paper, Claire. Stop making everything difficult. I read the first page of the agreement. It was worse than I thought. It gave my parents absolute discretion over the funds. That meant they could decide to give me nothing if they wanted to. It also said that the trust could loan money to family businesses. I knew exactly what that meant. They wanted to use my money to pay off the debts on the house and bail out Evan's failing business ideas. They were going to drain my account dry and leave me with scraps. I closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. No, I said. The room went deadly silent. My father's face turned a dark shade of red. Excuse me? I said no. I repeated. My voice was trembling, but I made sure it was loud enough. I am not signing that. Grandpa left that money to me, not to the family.
To me.
My father stood up. He slammed his hand on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. You ungrateful little brat, he shouted. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. You think you can just walk away with $1 million while this family struggles? You aren't struggling. I yelled back. You live in a mansion. You drive luxury cars. If you're struggling, it's because you spend money you don't have. That is enough, Richard said, his voice sharp. He looked at my father. Robert, sit down. Getting angry won't solve this. My father sat down, breathing heavily. He adjusted his tie. When he looked at me again, his eyes were different. They weren't angry anymore. They were cold. Cool. Okay, Claire, he said softly. We try to do this the nice way. We try to treat you like an adult. But if you want to act like a child, we will treat you like a child. What does that mean? I asked. It means, my mother said, a nasty little smile playing on her lips, that we know you aren't well. You've always been unstable. The stress of this inheritance is obviously too much for you. Richard opened his briefcase and pulled out another stack of papers. These were a contract. They looked like court documents. We have prepared a petition for conservatorship, Richard said. He didn't even look ashamed. We have affidavits from your family stating that you have a history of erratic behavior, poor decision-making, and emotional instability. We are asking the court to appoint your mother as the guardian of your estate. I felt the blood drain from my face. A conservatorship. It was what they did to old people with dementia, or celebrities who had public breakdowns. They wanted to strip me of my rights. They wanted to tell the court I was crazy so they could legally steal my money. You can't do that, I whispered. I'm perfectly sane. Are you? My father asked. Who is the judge going to believe? 2 respected members of the community and a business owner? Or a girl who works at a diner and lives in a studio apartment? We have the resources, Claire. We can keep you in court for years. We will drain that account in legal fees before you ever see a dime of it. Or you can sign the trust agreement today, and we can all go have dinner. It was blackmail. Pure and simple. I stood up. I felt sick. I looked at the 3 of them, my family. The people who were supposed to love me. They looked like monsters. Do it, I said. My father blinked. What? File the petition, I said.
Do your
worst. But I am not signing that paper. I turned and walked toward the door. Claire, my mother screamed. If you walk out that door, you are dead to us. I was dead to you a long time ago, I said. I was just the only one who didn't know it yet. I walked out of the house. I got into my car. I didn't cry.
I was past crying.
I was in survival mode. I drove home, locked my door, and waited. I knew the war had officially begun. They didn't wait. They didn't hesitate. The fallout began the very next morning. I was at work, my real job at a small estate planning firm in the next town over. I was a junior associate, but I hadn't told anyone about my family drama. I wanted to keep my work life separate. At 10 a.m., the receptionist called me. "Claire, there is a man here to see you. He says he has papers." I walked out to the lobby. A process server handed me a thick envelope. "Claire Monroe." "Yes," I said. "You've been served." He walked away. I opened the envelope. It was the petition for conservatorship. Reading it was like being punched in the gut repeatedly. Petitioner alleges that the respondent, Claire Monroe, suffers from delusions of grandeur, inability to manage basic finances, history of antisocial behavior. It was all lies, every word, but it looked official. It looked damaging. By noon, the social smear campaign had started. My phone started blowing up with notifications. I checked Facebook. Evan had posted a long status update. He didn't name me directly, but he didn't have to. Family is everything. It breaks my heart when greed destroys people. Praying for my little sister today. Mental health is a serious issue, guys. If you have a loved one who is spiraling, don't give up on them, even when they hurt you. Hashtag family first, hashtag prayers needed. Below it were dozens of comments from our neighbors, my old high school friends, and my parents' friends. "So sorry to hear this, Evan. Is she off her meds again? Sending love to your mom and dad. They are saints for dealing with this." They were painting me as a mentally ill villain, and they were the heroes trying to save me. It was brilliant, and it was evil. The worst part was that it worked. 2 days later, my boss, Mr. Henderson, called me into his office. He was a kind man, but he was old-fashioned. He held a printout of the court filing in his hand. "Claire," he said gently, "we received a call from a lawyer named Richard Owens. He claims he represents your guardians." "They are my guardians," I said quickly. "It's a contested petition. It's a lie." "I understand that," Mr. Henderson said. "But this is messy. He's alleging financial incompetence. You handle sensitive trust accounts here, Claire. If this goes public, if clients find out we have an attorney who is being sued for incompetence." He trailed off. He didn't have to finish. "I need to place you on administrative leave," he said. "Unpaid. Just until this is resolved." "Mr. Henderson, please," I begged. "This is what they want. They're trying to starve me out." "I'm sorry, Claire. My hands are tied. Clear this up, and your desk will be waiting." I walked out of the office with a box of my things. I felt the stares of my coworkers. They had seen Evan's post. They were whispering. I went home to my apartment. I sat on the floor in the dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I felt completely crushed. They had taken my family. They had taken my reputation. Now, they had taken my job. I had the $1.2 million in the account, but I couldn't touch it. Richard had filed an emergency motion to freeze the assets until the hearing. I had $40 in my checking account. I was alone. I was broke. And the whole town thought I was crazy. "Maybe they're right," I whispered to the empty room. "Maybe I can't win." I looked over at the corner of the room. Grandpa Henry's old leather briefcase sat there. It was dusty. I hadn't opened it since the night he died. I had been too busy fighting. I crawled over to it. I just wanted to smell him. I wanted to smell the peppermint and old paper. I needed to feel like someone was on my side. I opened the latch. Click. Inside, it was a mess of papers. Receipts from 1995. Old tax returns. But in the back, there was a thick black binder. On the spine, written in white tape, it said, "Master Plan." I opened the binder. It wasn't just numbers. It was a diary. A log. Grandpa Henry had written down everything. August 4th, 2018, Robert asked for another loan. Said it was for home repairs. Found out he bought a boat. I told him no. He screamed at me for an hour. December 25th, 2020, Linda ignored Claire all day. Gave Evan a watch. Gave Claire a gift card. The girl is heartbroken. I must protect her. He had seen it. He had seen everything. I flipped through the pages, tears streaming down my face. And then I found the section on the will. He had drafted the will himself before taking it to a lawyer. He had made notes in the margins. They will try to take it from her. I know them. They are greedy. They will try to challenge the will. And right there, circled in red ink, was a note. Include forfeiture clause. No contest clause. Make it ironclad. I scrambled to find the copy of the will I had been given. I turned to section 7. I had skimmed it before, but legal language can be dense. I read it carefully this time. Section 7, subsection D, the no contest/forfeiture clause. In the event that any beneficiary under this will contest the validity of this will or attempts to legally challenge the distribution of assets to any other beneficiary or attempts to impede the distribution of said assets through legal action, that beneficiary shall forfeit their entire share of the estate. Their share shall return to the residue of the estate and be distributed to the remaining beneficiaries. I read it 3 times. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. Grandpa Henry had set a trap.
He knew they would come for me.
He knew they wouldn't be able to help themselves. My parents and Evan had filed a petition to challenge my competency to receive the money. They were legally challenging the distribution. By filing that lawsuit, they had triggered the trap. But there was a catch. They had lawyers. Richard Owens wasn't stupid. He would know about a forfeiture clause. Why would he let them file if it meant losing their own money? Unless... I grabbed the binder again. I looked at the date Grandpa Henry wrote the note. January 2022. Then I looked at the copy of the will Richard had provided. It was dated March 2022. But something was wrong. I looked closer at the stapled copy of the will in my hand. Section 7 was there, but subsection D was short. It was watered down. It said, beneficiaries may challenge for good cause. Good cause. That was the loophole. But the binder had a photocopy of the signed original will. The one Grandpa Henry kept for himself. I compared the two. The page in the binder had the ironclad, strict clause. The page in the official copy Richard gave me had the watered-down clause. They were different. My blood ran cold. They hadn't just challenged the will. They had altered it. They must have swapped the page. The page numbers aligned, but the text was different. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I was just a dumb girl who would look at the dollar amount and stop reading. I looked at the official will again. I looked at the notary stamp on the last page. It was dated March 15th, 2022. I looked at the binder log. March 15th, 2022. Too sick to leave the house. Stayed in bed all day. If he was in bed all day, how did he go to a notary? I stood up. The despair was gone. The sadness was gone. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the hunter. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number for Jake Preston. He was the one guy from law school I trusted. He was a forensic document expert now. Jake, I said when he answered. I need a favor. A big one. Claire? You sound intense. What's up? I think my family forged a will, I said. And I think they just handed me the weapon to destroy them.
I'm listening, he said.
I looked down at Grandpa Henry's handwriting in the binder. Trust but verify. I verified, Grandpa. I whispered. Now I'm going to make them pay. Most people would have gone straight to the police. Or they would have run to a new lawyer screaming about fraud. But Grandpa Henry had taught me patience. He taught me that if you want to trap a fox, you don't just chase it. You let it walk into the cage and lock the door. I decided to give them one chance. Just one. I sat at my small kitchen table. My apartment was quiet. I typed up 3 letters. One for my parents. One for Evan. One for Richard Owens. They were simple letters. I didn't use big legal words. I just stated the facts. I know about the discrepancy in Section 7 of the will. I have Grandpa Henry's original notes and the photocopy of the original signed document. You have 48 hours to withdraw the petition for conservatorship and release my funds. If you do not, I will contest the will based on fraud, and I will enforce the forfeiture clause. This means you will lose everything. I sent them via certified mail. I wanted proof they received them. Then I waited. The 48 hours passed slowly. I sat by my phone. Part of me, the little girl who just wanted her mom to love her, hoped they would call. I hoped my mother would say, "Okay, Claire.
You win.
Let's stop fighting." But they didn't call. Instead, on the morning of the 3rd day, a courier arrived at my door. He handed me a large envelope from Richard Owens' office. I opened it. There was a letter on top. It was smug. Dear Ms. Monroe, your threats are baseless. Your grandfather was confused in his final years. To clarify his intentions, we have located a codicil, an amendment, to the will dated 3 months prior to his death. Enclosed is a copy. This document explicitly states his wish for the family to manage his assets.
Jointly.
We will be submitting this to the court. I pulled out the codicil. It was a single page. It looked official. It had Grandpa Henry's signature at the bottom. It read, I, Henry Monroe, being of sound mind, hereby amend my will to state that all liquid assets shall be placed in a family management trust, overseen by my son Robert. I realized that Claire is too young to handle such a burden alone. I read it. I felt a cold chill. If this was real, I was done. If this was real, the judge would side with them. But then I looked closer. I looked at the signature. It looked like Grandpa's signature. But it was shaky. Not shaky like an old man, but shaky like someone trying to draw a picture. Then I looked at the notary seal at the bottom of the page. A notary seal is a stamp that proves a document is real. It has the notary's name, their commission number, and the date their commission expires. The stamp belonged to a Brenda J. Smith. Commission expiration date, May 12, 2026. I stared at that date. The document was dated January 10, 2022. In the state of Ohio, a notary commission lasts for 5 years. That means if her commission expired in 2026, she received her stamp in 2021. So the dates lined up. It seemed fine, but something bothered me. I went to my laptop. I logged into the Secretary of State's website. It's a public database. Anyone can use it. I searched for Brenda J. Smith. Her name popped up. Status: active. Commission issue date: May 12, 2021. Okay, so she was a real notary. But then I looked at the document again. The text of the amendment was typed in a very specific font, Calibri Light. I remembered something from my time working at the law firm. We had an issue once with a document formatting update. I looked at the date of the document again, January 10th, 2022. Then I looked at the notary stamp again. And then I saw it. It was tiny. It was almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. The notary stamp had a small manufacturer's code at the very bottom, in tiny print. It was a code used by the company that made the rubber stamp. It said, MFG06-23. Manufactured June 2023. I felt my heart stop, then start beating double time. The document was dated January 2022. Grandpa Henry died in March 2022. But the rubber stamp used to notarize the document wasn't even manufactured until June 2023. They had created this document after he died. They had backdated it. They had found a notary, probably a friend of Richard's, to stamp it illegally. But they had used a new stamp. A stamp that didn't exist when Grandpa was alive. They hadn't just ignored my warning. They had committed a felony. They thought they were being smart. They thought they were burying me, but they were sloppy. I picked up the phone. I didn't call my parents. I called Jake. Jake, I said, my voice steady and cold. I need you to clear your schedule. We are going to destroy them. Jake Preston met me at a coffee shop downtown. Jake was an old friend from law school. He was the kind of guy who loved puzzles more than he loved people. He worked as a forensic document examiner now, the guy who figures out if a signature is fake or if a document has been altered. I slid the codicil across the table to him. Tell me what you see, I said. He took out a small magnifying loupe from his pocket and leaned over the paper. He was quiet for a long time. He smelled the paper. He held it up to the light. Well, he said, sitting back. The paper is new. It's too white. Paper yellows slightly over time, even in a few years. This looks like it came out of a fresh ream from Staples yesterday. What about the signature? I asked. It's a tracing, Jake said confidently. See these little dots of ink? That's hesitation. When you sign your own name, you do it in one fluid motion. Muscle memory. When you trace someone else's name, you move slower. Your hand shakes a little. This was traced, probably from the original will, using a light box. And the stamp. I pointed to the manufacturer's code. Jake looked at the MFG 06-23 code. He let out a low whistle. Game over, he said. This is physically impossible. You can't use a stamp that hasn't been made yet. This proves the document was created at least a year after your grandfather died. Can you write an affidavit? I asked. A sworn statement for the court? Absolutely, Jake said. I'll attach the microscopic photos. It will be bulletproof. I felt a wave of relief. I had the smoking gun. I could prove the fraud. But then a question hit me.
Why?
Why were they doing this? I knew my parents were greedy, and I knew Evan was entitled. But this? Forging legal documents? Risking jail time? This wasn't just greed. Greed is wanting more. This felt like desperation. People don't commit felonies unless they feel like they have no other choice. Jake, I said, I need one more favor. You have access to the public property records and the court debt filings, right? Yeah, I have a subscription to the premium database. Why? Run my parents' names, I said. And Evans. Jake opened his laptop. He typed in Robert and Linda Monroe. He clicked a few buttons. He frowned.
Whoa, he said.
What? Claire, your parents aren't just rich people trying to stay rich. They are broke. What do you mean? I'm looking at a notice of default recorded 3 months ago. They haven't paid their mortgage in 6 months. The bank has started foreclosure proceedings on the big house. I stared at him. The house? The perfect house with the white pillars? They were losing it? And there's more, Jake said. Credit card lawsuits. 3 of them. American Express is suing your father for $52,000. Check Evan, I said. My voice felt hollow. Jake typed in Evan Monroe. Even worse, Jake said. His business ventures? He took out a small business loan for a tech startup last year. It folded in 4 months. He personally guaranteed the loan. He owes $340,000, and he has a lien on his car. I sat back in my chair. The noise of the coffee shop faded away. Suddenly, everything made sense. The cheap Christmas presents. The refusal to help me with tuition. My mother's obsession with appearances. My father's anger. They weren't protecting the family legacy. There was no legacy. They were drowning. They had spent everything to keep up the image of being wealthy. They were living on credit and lies. And then Grandpa Henry died, and he left $1.2 million real cash. It was their lifeline. It was the only thing that could save the house, pay off Evan's debt, and keep up the charade. But Grandpa gave it to me. That's why they were so angry. That's why they attacked me. That's why they were willing to forge a document. They were terrified. They were cornered animals. If I kept the money, their world would collapse. They would lose the house. Evan would go bankrupt. The neighbors would know the truth. I looked at the forged document on the table. For a second, I felt pity. I felt sad for them. They were so afraid of looking poor that they became criminals. But then I remembered the way my father rolled his eyes at me. I remember my mother calling me unstable to the whole town. I remembered Evan smirking while I worked nights at the diner. They were willing to destroy my life, to have me declared incompetent, to ruin my career, to take away my freedom, just to cover up their own failures. They didn't come to me and ask for help. They tried to steal from me. My pity evaporated. It was replaced by cold, hard resolve. Print it all out, Jake, I said. Print the foreclosure notices. Print the debt lawsuits. Print the bankruptcy filings. What are you going to do? Jake asked. I'm going to court, I said. They wanted to question my competence? Fine. I'm going to show the judge exactly who the incompetent ones are. I gathered the papers. I had my exhibits. Exhibit A, the forfeiture clause. Exhibit B, the forged amendment with the impossible date. Exhibit C, the forensic report. Exhibit D, the motive, their massive secret debt. I was ready. The hearing was set for Tuesday morning. I went home and ironed my best suit. I polished my shoes. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't see the invisible daughter anymore. I saw a lawyer. I saw a woman who was about to bring the whole house of cards crashing down. See you in court, Dad, I whispered. The day of the hearing was bright and cold. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early. I sat on a wooden bench in the hallway, watching the people go by. I saw lawyers running with files, families crying in corners, and police officers drinking coffee. Then I saw them. My parents and Evan walked out of the elevator. They looked like they were going to a photo shoot. My father wore his best navy suit. My mother had her hair done perfectly, stiff with hairspray. Evan was wearing sunglasses indoors. Richard Owens walked beside them, laughing at something my father said. They didn't see me at first. I was sitting in the shadows. I watched them interact. They looked confident. They looked like winners. They had no idea that they were walking into a trap. When the bailiff opened the doors to Courtroom 4B, they marched in. I waited a moment, took a deep breath, and followed. I walked to the defendant's table. My father looked over. This was the moment. He looked at me, looked at my simple suit, and then he rolled his eyes. He slumped back in his chair. My mother whispered something to Evan, and Evan smirked. They thought I was there to beg. They thought I was there to surrender. All rise, the bailiff shouted. Judge Meredith Callahan entered the room. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp glasses and a face that said she had seen every lie in the book. She sat down and opened the file. In the matter of the estate of Henry Monroe, she read, and the petition for conservatorship over Claire Monroe. She looked over her glasses at the plaintiff's table. Mr. Owens, you are representing the petitioners? Yes, Your Honor, Richard said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. We are here to protect the interests of the family and, specifically, the well-being of Ms. Monroe. I see, the judge said. She turned to me. Ms. Monroe, I see you are present. Where is your attorney? The room went quiet. My mother let out a loud, dramatic sigh. I stood up. My legs felt strong. I am representing myself, Your Honor. Richard chuckled. It was a low, condescending sound. Your Honor, he said, this is exactly what we are talking about. Ms. Monroe's refusal to seek professional help is a symptom of her confusion. I am not confused, Mr. Owens, I said. My voice was clear. It carried to the back of the room. And I am not unrepresented. I am a licensed attorney in the state of Ohio. My father's head snapped up. My mother froze. Evan took off his sunglasses. Excuse me? Judge Callahan asked, raising an eyebrow. I passed the bar exam 2 years ago, Your Honor, I said. I practice estate law. I didn't tell my family because, well, as you will see, they don't take much interest in my life unless there is money involved. The judge looked at me with new interest. Proceed. Richard looked flustered. Objection. Relevance. Overruled. The judge said, let's get to the petition. Why do you think this woman is incompetent? Richard launched into his speech. He talked about how I was emotionally fragile. He talked about how $1.2 million was too much responsibility. He painted a picture of a sad, broken girl who needed her daddy to manage her piggy bank. We also have a document, Richard said, pulling out the forged codicil. A codicil signed by the deceased, Henry Monroe. It explicitly states his desire for a family trust. He handed the paper to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. This changes things, the judge said, reading it. If this document is valid, the money goes to the family trust, not directly to Ms. Monroe. Exactly, Your Honor, Richard said, smiling at my parents. My father was beaming. He thought he had won. Ms. Monroe, the judge asked, do you have a response? Yes, Your Honor, I said. I picked up my first folder. I have 3 exhibits to present. I walked to the podium.
I didn't look at my family. I looked only at the judge. Defense Exhibit A, I said, handing over the papers. The original will and testament of Henry Monroe, specifically Section 7, subsection D, the forfeiture clause. I am familiar with it, the judge said. It states that any beneficiary who challenges the distribution of assets forfeits their share, I said. By filing this petition and by presenting this new codicil, my family is challenging the original distribution. Technically true, the judge said. But if the codicil is valid, it overrides the will. If it is valid, I repeated. Which brings me to Defense Exhibit B. I handed the judge the forensic report and the zoomed-in photos of the notary stamp. Your Honor, I said, Mr. Owens has submitted a document dated January 10th, 2022. It was notarized by a Brenda J. Smith. Yes, please look at the second page of my exhibit, I said. It is a microscopic photograph of the notary's stamp used on that document. The judge leaned in. The courtroom was silent. You could hear a pin drop. The manufacturer's code on the bottom of the stamp reads MFG 06-23, I said. That stands for Manufactured June 2023. I paused for effect. My grandfather died in March 2022. It is physically impossible for him to have signed a document that was notarized with a stamp that did not exist until 1.5 years after his death. The judge stopped moving. She stared at the photo. Then she looked at the document Richard had submitted. Mr. Owens, the judge said. Her voice was very quiet, but it was terrifying. Where did you get this document? Richard was pale. He was flipping through his papers frantically. My clients provided it to me. I assumed it was legitimate. You assumed, the judge snapped. And finally, Exhibit C, I said. The motive. I handed over the foreclosure notices and the debt lawsuits. My parents are not trying to protect me, Your Honor, I said. They're facing foreclosure. My brother is facing bankruptcy. They forged this document because they are drowning in debt, and they intended to use my inheritance to bail themselves out. I turned around and looked at my family. My father was gripping the table, so hard his knuckles were white. My mother was trembling, her hand over her mouth. Evan looked like he was about to be sick. The smirk was gone. The eye-rolling was gone. They weren't looking at Claire the Mess anymore. They were looking at the prosecutor. Judge Callahan didn't even call for a recess. She sat there for 2 minutes, reading every page I had given her. She looked at the debt records. She looked at the forged signature. Then she took off her glasses and set them on the bench. Stand up, she ordered the petitioners. My parents and Evan stood up slowly. Richard Owen stood up too, but he took a step away from them, trying to distance himself.
I've been sitting on this bench for 20 years, Judge Callahan said. I have seen families fight over china sets and cars. But I have rarely seen a fraud this clumsy and this malicious. She looked directly at my father. Mr. Monroe, you came into my courtroom claiming your daughter was incompetent. You claimed she needed your guidance. Yet, the evidence shows that she is a capable attorney who has managed her affairs perfectly while you have driven your own finances into the ground. My father tried to speak. Your Honor, I didn't know the document. Be quiet, she snapped. Do not insult my intelligence by lying further. You submitted a forged legal document to this court. That is perjury. That is fraud. She turned to the court reporter. Let the record show that the petition for conservatorship is dismissed with prejudice. There is absolutely no basis for it. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. But we are not done, the judge said. Ms. Monroe invoked the forfeiture clause. And since the petitioners have not only challenged the will but attempted to defraud the estate, I am enforcing that clause immediately. My mother let out a little cry. What does that mean? It means, Mrs. Monroe, the judge said coldly, that the inheritance your father left you, the stock portfolio and the bonds, is forfeited. It means the house he left to your son is forfeited. Under the terms of the will, those assets return to the residue of the estate. And who gets the residue? My father whispered. The judge looked at the will. The sole remaining beneficiary, Claire Monroe. The air went out of the room. You can't do that. Evan shouted. That's my house. I have plans for that house. Bailiff, the judge warned. Evan shut his mouth. The order stands, the judge said. All assets previously designated for Robert, Linda, and Evan Monroe are hereby transferred to Claire Monroe. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into forgery and fraud. Mr. Owens, I will be reporting this conduct to the Bar Association. Richard Owens looked like he was going to faint. Case closed, the judge said. She banged her gavel. It sounded like a cannon shot. I packed my briefcase. I felt calm. I didn't feel happy, exactly. It wasn't a happy thing to watch your family be destroyed, but I felt clean. I felt like a heavy weight had been taken off my shoulders. I walked toward the exit. I had to pass them. My mother grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight. Her eyes were wide and desperate.
Claire, she said.
Claire, please. You can't let them take the stocks. We have the mortgage. We have the loans. We will lose everything. I looked at her hand on my arm. The same hand that had given me a sweater while my brother got a computer. The same hand that had signed a paper saying I was crazy. I gently pulled my arm away. You should have thought about that before you rolled your eyes, Mom, I said. Claire, we are your family, my father pleaded. He looked old suddenly. We raised you. No, I said. You just housed me. Grandpa Henry raised me. I turned to Evan. He wouldn't even look at me. He was staring at the floor. Good luck with the bankruptcy, Evan, I said. I walked out of the courtroom doors. I walked down the long hallway, out into the bright sunlight. I took a deep breath of fresh air. It smelled like winter, crisp and cold. I checked my phone. I had a text from Jake. Did we win? I typed back. We didn't just win. We cleaned house. 30 days later, the dust had settled. The transfer of assets was faster than I expected. The judge's order was absolute. My parents tried to appeal, but no lawyer would take their case after the fraud revelation. I didn't keep everything. I didn't want the family house, the one Evan was supposed to get. It held too many bad memories. I sold it. I took the money from the sale and the money from the stock portfolio, my parents' share, and I created the Henry Monroe Scholarship Fund. It was a full-ride scholarship for first-generation college students who had to work to pay their tuition. I wanted Grandpa's money to help kids who felt invisible, just like I had. I kept the original $1.2 million he left me. I used it to quit my job and start my own practice. I rented a small, beautiful office in the city. I put a plaque on the door, Monroe Estate Law. I specialized in helping elderly people protect their assets from greedy relatives. I was good at it. I knew exactly what signs to look for. As for my family, the fallout was brutal. Without the inheritance to save them, the bank foreclosed on my parents' mansion. They were evicted 2 weeks ago. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a noisy part of town. It was a humiliating come-down for people who cared so much about status. Evan filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
His car was repossessed.
Last I heard, he was working at a car rental agency near the airport. Richard Owens was disbarred. He lost his license to practice law. I didn't visit them. I didn't call to gloat. I just lived my life. But one afternoon, about 6 months later, I received an email. The subject line was just hello. It was from my mother. Claire, I hope you are doing well. Your father and I are settling in. The apartment is small, but we are managing. We miss you. We were wondering if you would like to come over for coffee this Sunday? We could put all this behind us. We are still family. I stared at the screen. They still didn't get it. They thought family was a magic word that erased abuse. They thought that because they were struggling now, I would feel guilty and come running back with my checkbook. I thought about the years of being ignored. I thought about the forged will. I thought about the conservatorship. I hit reply. Mom, I am doing very well. I am not available for coffee. I will not be available in the future. I wish you both peace, but I cannot give you my presents. Please do not contact me again. Claire. I pressed send. I closed my laptop and swiveled my chair around. Behind my desk, on the wall, hung a framed photo of Grandpa Henry. He was sitting on his porch, wearing his cardigan, holding a ledger. I smiled at him. Love without respect, I whispered to the photo, repeating the lesson I had learned the hard way, is just control wearing a mask. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I wasn't the victim. I picked up a pen and pulled a fresh legal pad toward me. I had a new client coming in 10 minutes. She was a young woman whose stepfather was trying to steal her trust fund. I was going to help her. I was going to teach her to keep her receipts. I was finally, truly free.